America is terminally ill. Now, America is also a good country. The media, the politicians, me, or even your personal beliefs might tell you otherwise sometimes. But America is a good country and a strong country. But it is currently very sick, and it has a lot of problems, especially economic ones that it must solve, or it will die. If you are American, you might think that this is impossible. And if you are not American, you might think, who cares? But just like the fall of Rome, a mighty and powerful empire, it can happen, and it can also affect the stability of the entire globe. So then, how do we fix these problems? How do we stop them from happening before it's too late? Some of these major problems are what I want to go over in this video. As always, my name is Derek, and I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. Let's get right into the video. Now, first and foremost, I am not God, and these are only my opinions. But they are opinions shared by many, and unfortunately ignored by the vast majority who are in charge. So let's try to shed some light onto these issues and perhaps change them. If there is one single threat greater than anything else, it is our ideological differences. Not our differences, but our inability to see the other side as anything else but the enemy. Our unwillingness as Americans, as brothers and sisters, to treat other Americans with respect simply because they think differently. And it doesn't matter the issue, whether it's political, Democrat versus Republican, whether it's religious, atheist versus Christian, or whether it is ideological, veganism versus meat eaters. We as Americans view other Americans poorly simply because they believe differently than we do. And on the internet, you'll hear people talk about how the only way to solve these problems is for them to leave. Or if you don't like it the way it's done, then get out. Or we should kick California out of the Union. Or Texas should become its own country. That way of thinking frames people with other ideas as the enemy, when in reality, different ways of thinking is what made this country great to begin with. And it is what has continued to evolve this country over the centuries. We also need to remember that when we strongly believe in something, we become extremely biased to that, either subconsciously or consciously. And extreme bias is dangerous, like a disease. And the only treatment for that disease is differentiating ways of thinking. Does that mean that you have to agree? No. Does that mean that we have to change our lives or our beliefs? No. What it means is that we need to always keep an open mind. And more than anything, we need to always dive deeper into why. Why do some people think differently than we do? Especially if that group of people make up 20, 30, 40, or 50% of the population. Yes, there are always crazy people with crazy ideas, and it is your right to ignore those people. But when a large portion of this country sees things differently than we do, we need to at least ask why and make an effort to understand why. That is our duty as Americans. Now, it isn't our duty to agree or to change our mind, but if we could all just remember that there are always two sides to a coin, we could all benefit from a more diverse way of thinking. In fact, if we don't start doing this, the country will fall. As with many great countries before us, the things that end us tend to come from within. And just like there are multiple illnesses, there are multiple things that can cause the fall of America from within. The second existential threat facing America is another one of these, and it is an economic problem. America has a spending problem, and because of that, it has a debt problem. We are over $30 trillion in debt. And just recently, we barely escaped an extinction level event by suspending the debt ceiling just in time. Now, I do have a video on that if you want to watch it after this one. But regardless, here's the problem. We keep having to raise the debt ceiling. It's happened time and time again, with the last major one being in 2011. Every time narrowly escaping disaster. Why? Because Congress argues with each other more than anything else. And I suppose that is a symptom of the first problem that we just talked about. Here's the thing. We cannot just keep raising the debt ceiling. This is, in effect, putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. It slows the bleeding, it buys us time, but it also just kicks the can down the road. And unless we cure the root cause, it will eventually lead to our destruction. Now, don't get me wrong, I've heard it all. 1. Debt doesn't matter as long as our GDP keeps going up. 2. Debt doesn't matter because the US government will just continue to print money. 3. Debt doesn't matter because we've always had debt as a nation. But debt does matter, especially extreme debt. The more debt we have, the more tax revenue goes to paying interest on that debt. The more debt we have, the more we must grow our GDP, just simply to avoid disaster. It's kind of like having a mortgage on your house that increases every single year. Sure, you can afford it if your income keeps going up, but it must continue to go up. That's not a spot you really want to be in. But in essence, it is the spot that the US government is putting us in. They are assuming on your behalf that your income will go up. Because your income and my income are the basis to the GDP of this country. Now, I know that that is not an exact representation, but it kind of drives home the point. Because you wouldn't want a mortgage that goes up every single month on your home. Then why are we so okay with the government placing a mortgage that goes up every single month on our home? Because this country is our home. The US government gets ripped off on many fronts. It is widely known that the US military overspends on almost everything because contractors know that there is basically an unlimited money pool to pay from. So when we talk about needing a defense budget of over $600 billion, and look, I agree, we do need a major defense budget. But what if we could cut costs? What if we didn't pay for things that are clearly overpriced? You know, I had a friend who was in the military, and he said that he personally saw his base redo the flooring twice, because if they didn't spend the budget, it would be cut the following year. Now, I can't personally confirm if that's true, but I take his word at face value. You think maybe if we eliminated this overspending, we would be just as strong with $400 billion of defense budget instead of $700 billion? What about healthcare? Should an ibuprofen cost $50? Should a 3-mile ambulance ride cost $5,000? I mean, what the f***? Now, maybe that's not directly related to the government, but it is still a clear sign that this country has a problem overpaying for things. And if we as a nation don't find a permanent solution to overspending, it will bring us down, either in years, decades, or centuries. But it will. It's interesting, when we think of things that we are facing as a nation, the things that can bring us down, we usually think of external threats. But we are already 2 into this list, and they both come from within. Food for thought. Now, I do believe that there are external forces that can bring us down as well. And that brings me to the third and final major threat on this list. And that is foreign, non-aligned countries, in particular, China. Ask me 2 years ago, and I would have also said Russia. But Ukraine has shown that the threat from Russia, while real, is not the main concern that we should be focusing on. China, on the other hand, I believe represents a major threat. It is powerful, both militarily and economically. In fact, it is the second largest economy in the world. And its political views and moral views are drastically different from our own. And it has made it very clear that it wants the US dollar to fall as the world reserve currency. What is ironic is that as much as there is a difference between the US and China, currently they both rely on each other for economic stability. The US enjoys cheap, easy to access goods, and China enjoys a strong economy by selling to its main trading partner, the United States. Here's the thing. I'm not convinced that the US needs China as China needs the US. We as Americans have become used to products made overseas because they are cheaper. But us being spoiled is very different from us actually being reliant. On the other hand, China has plenty of trading partners, but most of the large ones are either the US or US-aligned countries. So while at first glance China looks like the winning partner in trade, I think that is a false narrative. I think if push came to shove, the US could replicate almost all goods received from China elsewhere. I guess the question in regards to this threat is, do Americans value short-term or long-term more? Short-term, we enjoy cheaper and still relatively decently made products, but in the long term, we are in essence paying a country who has made it very clear that it is our global opponent. And what makes matters worse, it is a global opponent who does not share our enjoyment of democracy and liberties. If it were another democratic country with strong values for liberty and freedom, fine. I don't see a problem with a country like that being our global opponent. But the fact of the matter is the second largest economy in the world is our direct opposite. And when you have 2 major opposing world powers with very different viewpoints and beliefs, it can be quantified that they represent the largest external threat. America is a good country. Whether you agree with everything going on here, or whether or not you agree with the leadership, it is still, for the most part, a good country. With that said, it is a flawed country. It does have many problems. And some of them, like the ones that we've talked about here today, are existential or extinction level threats. So we as Americans need to try and fix those problems. Some of them, like the first one, we have direct control over. Some, like the second, we have partial control over. And others, like the last, we can only react to. But if we react appropriately and remember that regardless of whether you are red or blue, left or right, up or down, or anything in between, we are, above all else, humans, and secondly, Americans. So let's treat each other better. Let's keep an open mind, and let's try to solve our major problems before it's too late. I hope this video was informative and enlightening, and I hope that it spurred thought. And if you like this stuff, more importantly personal finance, investing, and economics, that is basically all that we do here on this channel. So consider subscribing if you haven't already, and don't forget to hit the bell notification so you don't miss the next video. Again, my name is Derek, and I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. I love this stuff, and I love being able to share it with you guys, and I will see you in the next video.